So I'm Michael Staib. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm the author of the Hot Chocolate GraphQL library for .NET. And today I want to talk to you about building real-time applications with GraphQL and Blazor. And it really fits good with the earlier talk because it's Blazor for WebAssembly. I never have done this talk in 25 minutes. It's usually I need an hour. So I stripped a lot out, and we will see how that goes. So with Blazor, Microsoft, for the first time in years, gives us .NET developers a viable solution for building rich SPA applications that run natively in the browser. But we're not stopping there today. We are taking Blazor to the next level by removing the friction of data fetching that we have with traditional technologies like REST, by using a GraphQL. And with GraphQL, we can put the front-end developer in the driver's seat, make him the boss of what he wants to consume and what he wants to use. I know a lot of developers, .NET developers at least, don't know GraphQL so well or have a strange concept about GraphQL in their head. So I'll do a little bit of repetition over what GraphQL is, and then we'll head straight into some coding. Okay, just let me fix that up here. Okay, so this is a GraphQL query. You could say it's the hello world of GraphQL. And what we've done here is basically we are asking, oh my, clicker. We are asking the server for the currently logged in user. And from the currently logged in user, we want to have just the name. And if we send that query to our server, we get a response that closely aligns our initial request. And that's by design. It almost looks like GraphQL just filled up our query graph with data. But it's not only about flat data structures. With GraphQL, I can drill into my graph. For instance, I could not only just ask for name or surname or birth date, I maybe could ask for the profile picture of that user. And I could drill into the properties of this picture. Like I want to know the width and the heights and the URL of that profile picture. And again, the server would send me the data in a structure I asked for. And with this, I can go much, much further because we basically can drill into relations of data. GraphQL is great handling relations and relational data. And you really start, when you start using GraphQL, you start thinking in graphs. And they are much more human readable than chopped up data structures. So in this example, I'm drilling into the friends of the user. I'm asking for the name and the last seen timestamp from the user. And also I'm asking for the same information of the friends. Maybe I want to create an online list in my web application and need these data for that. And again, like we expect, we get the data that we asked for and just the data we asked for. But we also can see that we created some repetition in our query. And GraphQL has a concept which is called a fragment. A fragment is basically a primitive of composition. It allows us to create fragment hierarchies as we create component hierarchies in our UIs or class hierarchies in our backends. And this really lets us shape our front-end applications or our consuming GraphQL applications in a very great way. And we will see that how we can put this to use in a minute. So let me sum that up. So with GraphQL, we have just one endpoint. Since with GraphQL, I don't need multiple endpoints where I can ask for different kinds of data because I'm in the driver's seat. I can define my GraphQL queries, send them to the server, and the server will respond with some data. And in GraphQL, I can ask for everything in one request. And that's crucial because GraphQL is built around the concept of efficiency and wants me to wants that I can fetch data in a very efficient way. And that means I don't have any problems with over or under fetching that I have with traditional technologies like REST or gRPC, because I can ask in one request for exactly the data that I need. And GraphQL is built on a strong type system. And that is important because it makes GraphQL predictable to use. When GraphQL says there is a string or the string is not nullable, I will never receive from the server a nullable string or a nullable in that case. Okay, but originally I would drill into Blazor, but I skipped that part. I think the former speaker already told you a lot about WebAssembly. And let's have a look how we can use basically Blazor to build a WebAssembly application with GraphQL. And what better to do than using something like Slack, because Slack is actually using GraphQL to interact with data. And it is a great app to show all the concepts in GraphQL off, like simple data fetching, that's a query in GraphQL, like mutating data, writing messages, that's a mutation in GraphQL, or real-time data, which is called subscription in GraphQL, and basically is when messages are just coming in real time. So what we are going to do is building a Slack clone that is not as beautiful, but I do my best. So let me, oh, wrong screen. Let me head over to my Visual Studio Code instance here. And this is basically an empty Blazor frame. I just did some, put some initial components in here, but let's have a look how they look like. I'm just starting that up. While that is compiling, I can already explain some things around it. Oh, it's already up. So let's have a first a look at what it's like. Okay, great. It's a simple application, as I said. We have on the left side our people list where we want to show the online list for the current user. And here in the mid area, we will build message bubbles like in iMessage on your iPhone, and we can interact. And if I don't run out of time, you can even send me messages in live in my debug session. So let's try that. Let's cancel that. So if you're familiar with .NET in general, this application already looks very easy to use here because we have a program CS, and every console application or ASP.NET Core web server basically has one of these. They are all console applications. And this looks exactly the same like my standard console applications. It has a program class in here. It has a main function here, and we have some builder, just like in ASP.NET Core, that sets up our system. But instead of hosting middlewares, we are adding here a component. And if we navigate to that component, oh, it's not. Let me just reload and then navigate there. And when we go to that component, we can see that in this component, it's just another tag. Like in this instance, a component main that is represented by this main tag. And we can navigate further and look into our components folder where we have another component, which is called main. That's a main that we added into our app component. And this component, again, has a component in it, which is called people list. And we can go along and see that there's a people list, and the people list finally has some HTML in it. And again, some other components, which are the placeholders that you saw on the left-hand side. And if we look in the placeholder, it's just HTML. And we just need that for loading indication. And then we have a person item. And this component will represent one user in our list in a minute. Okay, so there is a concept in SPA applications around dumb and smart components, or stateful and stateless components. Stateful components basically is where the magic happens. They push data down to the dumb components that actually do no data fetching. They actually just do nothing except displaying something and raising events. And these events are then caught in the stateful components, and they do some data interaction with the server. Okay, that's a basic run through our Blazor application here. Let's put some GraphQL in. In order to initialize GraphQL, and I'm copying this just, we need to have a client. And I already put in a client called Strawberry Shake. We have hot chocolate in the server, Strawberry Shake on the front end. And we can just initialize now a GraphQL client by typing up .NET GraphQL in it and telling it the server UI from our GraphQL server, and then it will download the GraphQL schema. And that tells our compiler that we hooked up into the MS Build pipeline what is possible on the server. The next thing we need to do is to write some query to fetch some data, to fetch our people list. So what I'm going to do is to create a file that is called queries.graphql. It actually can be named anything. It doesn't have to be named queries. I'm just doing it always. Okay. The next thing I will open up is our GraphQL IDE, also done by our open source project and also has a silly name. It's called Banana Cake Pop. Okay, what we want to do is query our GraphQL server, and we are just typing that up, get people here. And what it basically does is we are creating a query, and we are calling this query, or this is actually called an operation here, get people. And now we can ask the server for what we can do actually here. And we have IntelliSense since we have all the schema information around from the backend. So what we want to do is, or let me just paste that in because otherwise we are running out of time too quickly. So this is a GraphQL query here. And at the moment, I'm just asking for the people, for all the persons in my system. And I want the people ordered by name in ascending order. And I need for my component the name, the email, the is online status, and image URI if available, and the last scene. If I query that, I actually get all these data. And think about that. With other technologies, I would have to write a lot of data integration and logic in my client to maybe sort the data, to maybe strip out some data. But with GraphQL, I just tell the system what I need. So now I just paste that in here. And since we are hooked up to the compiler, I just built my project. Now there is a generated folder here. And I actually have now a person, and the person interface has only the fields I actually use in my query. Everything else from the server stripped out because we actually don't need it. Okay, let's put that together. The first thing is we go to our person item and we say we need some code here. And then we need a user. I actually have a snippet for it. Let's see if, no. Okay, let's write that from hand. Public I person, we are using our person, we call it user, get set. And what we are going to do is to put a parameter attribute on it. And then this actually allows me to pass in data into my component. And now I just put an add here. Let's raise a syntax as we used it before in backends. And that makes these references of my parameter here. Apart from that, I don't need any more in my person item. So let's move on to our people list. In my people list, I again need some code. Let's put that in there. Yeah, now I hope my snippets work because otherwise I really have a problem. Okay, right. So what we are going to do here is we are putting some loading indicator in which actually is filled by the auto component to tell this component that it's still loading. The second thing that we're putting in here is the person connection, which is a paging type in GraphQL. and lets me page through data on the backend. And it's all generated by our client. Okay, and now let's get this thing to life by writing a little if clause here. If it's loading, then we show the placeholders. And if it's not loading, we actually will use our person item here. And from the person item, we fill up the user. That's really a problem. Okay, so I won't type that up because otherwise we have no time. Let me move to a second example where I already did that. Okay, where we end up is basically that I for each over my nodes that are passed in, and I add so many person items as I have persons. Okay, then in my main component, I can wire that up. In Blazor, we have a concept of dependency injection. It's actually the same dependency injection framework that we use in the backend. We inject our generated iChat client here, and then we use it to just fetch our people. And what happened here is basically that our operation here, get people, translated into a method of our client in our C# code. So I just can ask get people here, ensure that there are no errors in my result, and then add this person to the context and notify the component that the state has changed. Let's run that. Okay, it's compiling and it's up. So let's go through that. And boom, we have some data here. So that all worked fine. What I didn't show you actually is that there is still some setup code to for the dependency injection here that I have already done. So I basically told the builder that I have a service. I use the HTTP client factory in the backend to fetch data from my backend. I also set up the socket here and I registered the client. Okay, so far so good. A simple fetch that we did, nothing more. Let's do some more fancy stuff and use some fragments. Okay, this second demo, I already, usually I do walk you really through that, but let's just skip over it. So this is our originally get people method or operation that we wrote in GraphQL. We now have here a fragment. And if we look at the fragment, this is how our person looks like. And our person is a fragment that uses, again, a participant here. So I'm creating fragment hierarchies here and basically telling my system what a person means in my domain. And I also did the same for message. And then I can use if you see here, in multiple operations, these fragments. Like I'm using it for get people, I'm using it in get message, I'm using the message fragment. In send message, I'm also using the message fragment, and also read message. So I'm reusing these fragments all over the place. And then in the message, I'm using the participant, which is actually a fragment that is also used by person. So I built up these hierarchies now, and let's see how that changes our code in our client. If we swap that out, we compile it. Oh, I should have stopped. I should have stopped the server first. Let's recompile. But we already can have a look, and we can now see that we have a person here, and the person has an image URI and the last seen, and the person implements a participant. So it really translated into clean, into a clean interface hierarchy on my client that I can now use. Okay, let's put these pieces in. I already have here the some set of new components to enable the message area. Let's put them in. And see if we get it running. Okay. So in my main component, I now need to implement a method where I can click on the person and then fetch the messages of the person that I interacted with. And we can do that. I hope I have some. Yeah, good. Okay, so this is basically the code to fetch the messages from a person I clicked on. And what it does is basically it uses another operation in my client, and it then sets some variables that we have still to create here. In this case, we need a person that is the recipient. Yes. And we also need an immutable list. List of messages. Of a message which is empty. Okay, and now my method will work. The next thing is, because before we are going to start this, let's put the other pieces in. We have here our event when we basically, in our lower box, send a message off to our users. So let's hope I have click send also as a snippet here. So this is basically when I click on my message and send it to the server. Again, it's in my client generated because I have it in my Graphql query. And I basically send it to the server, then get from the server back the message object. I add the message object to my message list and update that and be happy. Actually, what we should else do here is a state changed, so my component tree knows that it's updated. The last piece that we have to put in is our real-time functionality. So every time we basically get a message sent in real time, we want to display that also, like live messages coming in. So for that, we implement a begin receive messages method that spins off an asynchronous task, and that will open an asynchronous stream onto the backend. This is all generated, this code, into our client, and then we can just for each as long as we want over our message stream. So this method we have to just hook up to our initialize method here. And then let's see, should run. Let's do it. Let's run that and hope it works. Okay, we have 3 more minutes. Okay, so my client came up. Let's refresh that. I have here my users. But we did forget one thing, because what actually is missing here is our message list. I didn't put this component in. Now it is. That's why we didn't see anything happen. Okay, it's recompiling. It's coming up. Let's refresh that. Hope it works. Oh, there's still one last issue. We are not using a name, and we are missing a namespace which is called chat. Live debugging. It's always a challenge. Okay, next try. Okay, now we can already see there is a new area here. If I click on maybe bar, I can see I can write a message. If I click on Jose, who is a friend of mine, I can see there are messages from him already. I could send hello back. That is awesome. Okay, but let's try real time, because we put a real time method there in there. We are using GraphQL subscriptions. Let's see how that works. And for that, let me switch back to my slides. You can call this UL. Give you a minute. Just open it up. I'm doing that too. There you can see the UI. It's just a simple message box, and it's also a Blazor application, and you can basically send in messages like hello world. Send it in, and you can see it's popping up in here. And that's actually how easy you can set up real-time applications with GraphQL and Blazor. And as I said, actually this talk is 1 hour long, and I would go much deeper into how this actually works. But the simple takeaway here is all you had to do is write a GraphQL query here. And actually this part that is the real-time part here. And it is the same as if you write a simple fetch. And then Strawberry Shack will generate all the complex code and do all the complex stuff for you. And you can concentrate on building benefits for your customers. Okay, I hope you had fun. With that, I give back to the organizers.